Hello, my name is Tony Beers, and this is Movie Grades.
And just like the movies, we play out our last scene.
Hey everybody, Tony Beers here again, and in this episode of Movie Grades, I'm going to be talking about Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim takes place in the future where Earth has been invaded by giant monsters known as kaiju, who come not from outer space, but through a dimensional portal that opens up in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Conventional weapons and vehicles are useless against the kaiju, so giant robots known as Jaegers are built to fight the kaiju. One very unique thing about the Jaegers is that they have to be piloted by two pilots, who have to merge their minds and share memories. Now, I must say, I needed this movie. This movie, this summer has just been so disappointing for me. I mean, first was, Star Trek, which wasn't a bad movie. It just was kind of disappointing. And then, Iron Man 3, which just was so jokey. And in fact, the Mandarin himself was a literal joke. And, then Man of Steel, and if anybody watch my videos, you know what I think about Man of Steel, so it was a huge disappointment to me. So I really needed a fun action movie that would restore my faith in movies and mankind in general. Now, if there's anything bad about Pacific Rim, is the fact that it's not gonna be an instant classic. This isn't some movie that people will look back on and say, oh, this was so groundbreaking, or it's not gonna win a whole lot of Oscars, maybe in special effects and stuff like that, but it's not gonna have a lot of respect in Hollywood. People will just look at it and say, oh, this is just a giant monster battling giant robot movie. So if you're a snooty person, you're not gonna like this movie, and just by seeing the trailers, if you're gonna like it or not. I mean, and if you love this type of movie, you're gonna love it. I mean, if you looked at the trailer and said that looks awesome, as I did, you're gonna love it. This is your type of movie. Now, some of the logic doesn't really make sense in this movie. I mean, if you can put the weapons of these Jaegers on like a ship or a tank or something, why not just do that instead of building giant robots? Why not? Because you just use those weapons. I mean, if tanks and planes had these weapons, then yeah, they could defeat these kaiju. But for some reason, they never did that. Another thing is, these Jaegers, they have like swords on them and stuff, and that seems to be the most effective thing against these kaiju, and they don't bust them out until the very end. They just punch them or wrestle them or whatever, and it's like, just use the sword already. And that's the logic of this movie, and you either go with it or you don't. The actors are really good in this movie. They all do an excellent job. Charlie Hunnam, I think is his name. This is my first time seeing him in anything. And when I first saw the trailers, I actually thought he was Ray Liotta because he has that cool Ray Liotta type voice. And he's really good in this movie. Idris Elba is really good. I think this is the best movie I've ever seen him in. He has a real commanding presence, which works really good for a military leader that he is in this movie. The Asian girl, Rinku Kushi, or whatever her name is, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce her name, but she's really good. I mean, she plays a character who starts off as really timid in the beginning, and then she becomes more confident, and she makes this transition very well. Charlie Day is really good. He's really funny and smart in this movie. Ron Perlman is in this movie, and I like Ron Perlman in just about everything he's in. I mean, who doesn't like Ron Perlman? He's excellent. There's this little girl who plays the younger version of Mako in this movie, and she is fantastic. Her facial expressions give so much emotion without even saying a word, I think. She might have said a few things, probably in Chinese or Japanese or whatever, so I didn't understand what she said, but you could just tell what she's feeling just with her facial expressions. And being such a young actress, she did very well. The story is kind of simple, cliche, and basic, but it works in this movie. I like the fact that they actually bring you, they put you right into the action. You know, they start off with a montage and a narration, and they tell you all the exposition that you need to know, and just what you need to know. They don't give you a real boring exposition. They don't have. There's no story of how, the beginning days of when these first kaiju attacked, and then what's that, and then we got form these Jaegers or anything. It doesn't slow down the movie, and it doesn't make it boring. I mean, it gets right to what you need to know, and it doesn't give you any more than that. And I love that about this movie. The three main characters of Riley, Mako, and Staker all have interconnecting stories which really merge well together, and they all have their own backstory, and it's shown through flashbacks and things like that, and I really like how they all connect together. The CGI is amazing in this movie. It never looks fake or synthetic, and it merges well with the live action, and it looks seamless. I love the visuals in this movie. All the Jaegers and the kaiju and the pilot suits and all the sets and everything. It all looks fantastic. The 3D is amazing in this movie. It's some of the best 3D I've seen in a long while. And it's so good that, you see the rain coming at you, or the snow, or when you're underwater, you see like fish swimming by, and it really helps bring you into the movie. The action is amazing in this movie. The fights are so epic. My favorite fight is between Gypsy Danger and this kaiju, and there's this great scene where they finally pull out the swords for the first time, and my friend leaned over and said, "That's Voltron." And anyway, they pull out the sword and they do this amazing move, and it just looks so spectacular, and it really had me excited, and Mako just yells, "This is for my family," and you really feel excited, and I was really on the edge of my seat during this scene. Another great scene where Riley, they think the kaiju is dead, and they turn around and they look at it, and Riley says, "I think it's dead, but let me just check its pulse." And then he pulls out the gun in the Jaeger's palm, and he just turns over and he shoots it like 5 times, and it says, "Oh, that doesn't have a pulse anymore." And I love this scene, and this just proves how awesome the action is in this movie. Now, for the people who watch my videos, you're probably tired of me talking about Man of Steel and how much I hated it. But there's some things that Pacific Rim does just right in this movie, and there's so many things that Man of Steel did wrong. And I wanted to take a second to compare the two, and just to show you what things that Pacific Rim did right and what things that Man of Steel did wrong. Now, there's a scene very early on in the movie where Riley and his brother are ordered to attack this kaiju, and there is a civilian boat in between the kaiju and the Jaeger, and they're told to just forget about this boat, just leave it there and attack the kaiju. That's what you want to do. And instead, Riley and his brother disobey their orders, and they pick up the boat, and then they put it into safety. Now, that's a hero. That's what heroes are supposed to do. You think about the safety of the people before you think about the enemy you're fighting. Okay, now they did the exact opposite in Man of Steel, where Superman never thinks about saving anybody before he attacks Zod in the middle of Metropolis at the end of the movie. There, which goes against everything that Superman is all about. He saves people before he even thinks about getting into fights with supervillains. And this is where Pacific Rim does it right, and where Man of Steel does it very wrong. In Pacific Rim, most of the fights take place in the ocean, whereas in Man of Steel, most of the fights take place in Metropolis or other populated areas. And when the fights do go into populated areas in Pacific Rim, you see the people go into these shelters, whereas in Man of Steel, you don't see the people evacuate or do anything. They're just in these buildings, and you never see them go into safety. And this is another thing that Pacific Rim does right and Man of Steel does very wrong. The tone of Pacific Rim is very balanced. It's serious at some times, and it's comedic at other times, whereas Man of Steel only has this dreary, too serious tone. In Pacific Rim, Staker has this father-daughter relationship with Mako, and he's very protective of Mako. At one point in the movie, Riley has to tell him that you're no longer being protective of her, you're holding her back. Now, in Man of Steel, Paul Kent, as I said before, is very overprotective of Clark. Now, if only they had somebody in Man of Steel to tell Paul Kent, hey, you're holding Clark back, you're not protecting him anymore. Now, if only Mal Kent would have said something like that, it would have been a lot better in Man of Steel. But again, they made that huge mistake of making Paul Kent hold Clark back and not let him use his powers. This is another place where Pacific Rim does something right and Man of Steel does something very wrong. Now, Pacific Rim has very exciting action. I was on the edge of my seat every second of this movie. Whereas Man of Steel, the action is very visually exciting, but there's no emotion behind it. You know, Pacific Rim had bright colors. Their characters were passionate about what they were seeing, what was happening. Whereas Man of Steel, everyone was way too calm, and they had no passion when dealing with, you know, these crazy aliens attacking Earth and everything, and they were never excited. They were never scared. They were just way too calm, and therefore it made the action boring. You know, like I said, in Pacific Rim, I was at the edge of my seat every second, whereas in Man of Steel, I was bored and my butt was numb because I was so bored. The supporting characters in Pacific Rim are very interesting because they've got their own specialties and their own little personality quirks and everything like that. Whereas the supporting characters in Man of Steel are boring. I mean, you've got Perry White, characters like Perry White, Jenny, and Professor Emil Hamilton, who are in this movie, but what do? They don't do anything. They don't have any personality. They're boring. Pacific Rim has a lot of bright, beautiful colors. There's plenty of yellows, reds, blues, purples, whereas Man of Steel has nothing but grays and dull, bland colors. In Pacific Rim, like I said before, they tell the backstory and they give you exposition in this montage at the beginning with narration. So they give you all the exposition you need and nothing more that you don't need, no filler or anything like that. Whereas Man of Steel, they give you the origin again, which everybody knows anyway, and they give you a villain that you've already seen, which makes the origin of Superman and most of the movie, in fact, boring because we know the origin and we've seen this villain before. So overall, Pacific Rim is a great movie. It has great special effects, great action, fun characters. It's a fun action movie, and those are the type of movies that I love. And if you love fun action movies, if you like, you know, these kaiju Godzilla movies, if you like these giant mech anime, then this is the movie for you. This is the movie you should be seeing right now. Go out and see it. Please support this movie. You know, I love this movie, and since I love it, but it's not perfect. I'm gonna have to give it, and this is my final grade right here, is a A-. I'm Tony Beers, and I'll see you next time.